The school auditorium was alive with the energy of chatter, the kind that filled the space with an undercurrent of both excitement and anxiety. Parents milled about, some dressed neatly in office attire, others in casual clothes that betrayed the long day they had just endured before rushing here. The wall and houses, artwork from the children, each piece brimming with innocent pride. The smell of floor polish lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee from a table someone had set up near the door. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, and teachers moved about with clipboards, answering questions and offering reassuring smiles to anxious parents. Daniel leaned against the back wall, his tall frame standing out not because of confidence but because of the quiet solitude he carried. His dark hair, just beginning to gray at the temples, was a little tousled, and his flannel shirt was clean but well worn. There was a certain tiredness etched into his face, the kind that didn't come from one sleepless night but from years of responsibility carried without complaint. He wasn't the kind to complain, anyway. Raising his daughter Emily alone had given him strength he didn't know he had, but it had also carved invisible lines of exhaustion into his spirit. Yet when he thought of Emily, her bright laugh, her endless questions, the way her eyes sparkled when she learned something new, it always felt worth it. Tonight, he was here for her, just like every night before. As he watched the swirl of parents around him, his eyes were casual, moving without intention, until they stopped. The world seemed to still in that instant, the background noise fading into a dull hum, as though someone had dimmed everything around him. Across the room, near one of the teachers' desks, stood a woman who seemed both familiar and impossibly distant. She was speaking with a teacher, her voice calm and assured, her posture graceful. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek bun, not a strand out of place, and her suit was sharp, perfectly tailored, the kind of clothing that spoke of power and precision. Yet her face, was what undid him. Daniel's breath caught, his chest tightened as memories he thought long buried surged to the surface. That face, those eyes, it couldn't be. But it was. Sophia, his first love, the girl who had once been his whole world. He blinked, half afraid he was imagining her, that perhaps the years of longing and loneliness had conjured her spirit in the crowd. But she was real, standing only 20 feet away, alive and radiant, as if the years had been kind to her in a way that life had not always been to him. She looked older, of course, but it was the kind of maturity that added depth to beauty rather than dimming it. Confidence radiated from her, not arrogance, but the kind born from years of climbing, achieving, succeeding. She looked like someone who belonged in the world of shining offices and city lights. And he looked down at his calloused hands, at his flannel sleeves, and felt, for the first time in years, the heavy ache of inadequacy. 15 years. That's how long it had been since he last saw her. Back in high school, Sophia had been his compass, his safe place, his best friend and first love rolled into one. They had spent summers under the stars, talking about dreams and futures that seemed so certain at the time. She had wanted to go to the city, to chase something bigger than their small town could ever offer. He had wanted to follow her anywhere, but life had other plans. His father had fallen ill, and duty had anchored him in place. Letters and phone calls had tried to bridge the gap, but slowly, painfully, they dwindled, until silence grew where once there had been laughter. She left, and with her went the future he had imagined. And now, here she was. Daniel's heart raced as his eyes lingered on her. He wanted to move, to approach, to say something, anything. But his body stayed rooted, his feet refusing to listen. Doubts crept in like shadows. Did she even remember him? Would she recognize him in this man he had become? He had built a life of responsibility and sacrifice, not boardrooms and corner offices. His world was carpools and grocery lists, patched jeans and secondhand toys, long hours at work to keep the bills paid. What could he possibly mean to her now? Sophia's conversation with the teacher ended, and as she turned, her gaze swept across the room. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Daniel felt it like a spark, sharp and undeniable. Her eyes widened slightly, recognition dawning. And then, his heart nearly stopped, she said his name. Daniel. The sound of it, spoken in her voice, collapsed the years in an instant. It wasn't the voice of the CEO parents whispered about, not the voice of the woman commanding rooms filled with powerful people. It was the voice of the girl he once loved under starry skies, who had promised forever before life had swept her away. In that moment, the auditorium didn't feel crowded anymore. It was just the two of them, standing on either side of all the years and choices that had led them here, staring across the chasm of time with hearts that remembered more than their minds could ever admit. Parents began to file out of the school auditorium, their conversations carrying into the hallway, echoing off the tiled floors. Some lingered behind to shake hands with teachers, while others hurried off, glancing at their watches and already calculating how late dinner would be. The chatter blended into a low murmur, fading as the crowd thinned. Daniel stayed behind, kneeling to help Emily stuff her books into her backpack. She was chattering about how Mrs. Carter, her teacher, had praised her science project. Her tiny hands fumbled with the zipper, and Daniel leaned forward, gently fixing it for her. "Got it," he said softly, giving her shoulder a squeeze. He tried to focus on her words, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He told himself not to look around for Sophia again, not to let hope twist inside him. Their worlds were too far apart now. She was polished, powerful, living a life that seemed untouchable. He was just a single father doing his best to keep up. Still, no matter how hard he tried, his heart betrayed him, beating faster with the thought of seeing her again. The soft sound of heels clicking against the hallway floor pulled him from his thoughts. His head lifted, and there she was, Sophia, walking toward them, her confidence tempered now with something softer, something almost vulnerable. She stopped beside him, her smile warm and genuine, her gaze falling on Emily first. "You must be Emily," she said, her voice gentle, with the kind of warmth that melted through the tension. "I can see the resemblance already." Emily hesitated, clutching her notebook close to her chest, then glanced at her father for reassurance. Daniel gave her a nod, and she smiled shyly. "Hi," Emily murmured, her voice small but polite. Sophia's smile widened, and for a moment, Daniel could see the girl she once had been, the girl who had laughed at his jokes, who had leaned against him under the stars and talked about dreams. When she stood upright again, her eyes met his, and time seemed to still once more. "It's been a long time," she said quietly. Daniel's throat tightened, his mind racing for words. 15 years, he finally managed, his voice steady but low. He studied her face, the confidence in her features, the grace in her movements. Yet beneath all that, he could see the same softness he had once known. You look the same. Just, stronger." A soft laugh slipped past her lips, light and genuine. "And you," she said, tilting her head slightly as if she were really seeing him. Still the same eyes, still grounded. They walked together toward the doors, Emily skipping a few steps ahead, humming a tune under her breath. Outside, the air was crisp, autumn's coolness settling into the night. The parking lot was half empty now, cars pulling out one by one. Streetlights cast golden halos over the pavement, and the faint chirping of crickets drifted in from the trees nearby. Sophia slowed her steps, her hands clasped lightly in front of her, as though she were holding back words she wasn't sure she should speak. Finally, she broke the silence. "I've spent years chasing everything I thought I wanted," she began, her voice low, reflective. "The career, the success, the name. And I got it, every last bit of it. But standing here tonight, watching all these parents, seeing you," her voice faltered for the briefest second. "I realized how much I missed what I left behind." Daniel's chest tightened, her words stirring something long buried. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. He had thought she would appear untouchable, distant, someone he could only admire from afar. Instead, here she was, confessing truths that mirrored his own quiet ache. He searched for words, but none seemed enough. So he let silence fill the space between them, his gaze steady on her. He thought of the nights he had spent alone, the weight of responsibility, the loneliness he had carried like a hidden wound. He thought of how many times he had wished for someone to understand, someone who could see the man he was beneath the burdens. And now, that someone was standing before him again. Sophia turned to him, and in her eyes there was no trace of the powerful CEO the world saw. There was only a woman, vulnerable, searching. Maybe it isn't too late, Daniel," she said softly, almost as if she were afraid to hope. The words sank deep into him, unlocking something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He felt his lips curve into a smile, small at first but real. The heaviness in his chest eased, replaced by a spark he thought he had lost long ago. Emily ran back to him then, tugging at his hand, her face bright with innocence. "Daddy, can we get ice cream on the way home?" she asked. Daniel chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "We'll see," he replied. Then, glancing back at Sophia, he saw her watching, her expression soft, her eyes filled with something that looked very much like longing. For a moment, it didn't matter that she was a CEO or that he was just a single dad trying to hold life together. What mattered was that the girl he had once loved was here again, not as a memory but as a possibility. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt that maybe life really did give second chances, just when you least expected them.